What's up, YouTube family? My name is Shaka and this is African-American-Made. Today, I'm going to Favor and Grace Under Fire, a therapy and consulting practice owned by Miss Ashlea Taylor. And the amiable Miss Ashlea has invited me to her practice to gain insight into the dynamics of family and couples therapy. We'll talk about the methods she employed to help families build or rebuild relationships and how she became an entrepreneur in the mental health field. After what I deem as a very special mastermind session, I intend to gain valuable tools to help me improve the relationships in my life as I myself travel a path of healing and understanding. So, be open-minded, get ready to dig deep, because today we're going to seek favor and grace under fire. Okay, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, thank you. I am so happy to be talking to you today. Being a therapist it could be a very broad spectrum in practice.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to be sitting with you today. Maybe you can educate me and the audience on, different types of therapy and how did you get in the field? And just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Ashlea Taylor. I'm born and raised in Arizona, born in Flagstaff, raised in Phoenix. And basically, I've just always had an interest in people. I felt like I had a God-given intuition to understand people and help them kind of understand themselves and move through life transitions. So I have a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in marriage and family therapy from Arizona State University. And then after that, everything just kind of fell together. I knew that one day I would want to own my practice because I noticed that the current institutions that we have in Arizona, whereas their goals are really great, they haven't really hit the corner with cultural diversity and specifically how our people relate to each other and how we can bring that in therapy. So I knew that once I learned what I needed to learn and was well versed and well educated with more experience after school, that I would definitely open my own and tailor it to African American people. So there's many great therapy modalities. The ones that I feel work best with African American people, one, EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's one of the best trauma therapies out there. It makes it so you're not in therapy forever. I always tell people I am the Black therapist Mary Poppins. I'm here when you need me and I'm gone when you're not. So my clients, we eradicate the dysfunctional patterns and we figure out what patterns would work better.
Explain to me what family and marriage therapy is.
Yes, so marriage and family therapy, let's start from the beginning. Most people think that marriage and couples therapy is simply multiple people in a room working on their collective issues. That is actually wrong. The study of marriage and family therapy is looking at the dysfunctional generational patterns of an individual or the multiple individuals in the room, understanding that the current symptoms that brought everybody into the room are linked to those specific generational patterns. So, for example, if I have a whole family in the room, I have a mother, a father, and 3 kids. They may be coming in because the whole family all of a sudden just doesn't get along. The kids are growing up, the parents have discord. Well, the first thing that a marriage and family therapist is going to do is get the background for 3 generations, at least 3 generations going back, because our brain is a pattern-seeking organism, and whether we acknowledge it or understand it or not, the way that we move, our behaviors, actions, and thoughts, we can trace them back generations. So in order to create true change, we have to look at the past to understand what you're currently doing and in order to change the future. So couples therapy and marriage and family therapy will always include your history, and it will include a skilled therapist asking you, do you want to eradicate these dysfunctional generational patterns that are currently creating the symptoms that brought you into my office? We do not put Band-Aids on broken arms. We try to eradicate the problem.
That brings a good question. So you're saying that a person cannot have certain issues without it necessarily being linked to some historical background?
Absolutely. If you look at post-slave syndrome, She does wonderful work where she links a lot of the current behaviors in African American society to slave times. For example, the absent father, now the absent mother, the way that we parent, the way that we gather around food usually, even pipeline to prison. She goes through her book and she links a lot of our current behaviors to slave times.
So in a relationship or in a family dynamic, siblings are not getting along with parents, or married couples are not getting along with each other.
Yeah.
There's some deterioration for whatever reason that's going on there. Whether it's the wife's side or the husband's side, their dysfunction is linked to some previous trauma. In other words, I guess what I'm asking is there ever an instance where that's not the case?
No. Sadly not. So for example, if I have a husband and wife come in, whatever your gender is, whatever your pronouns are, whoever walks into the room, let's say their problem is communication. So we're probably going to do a genogram, or I'm going to ask questions about both people's childhood. What I'm going to find is that maybe the husband comes from a very, very close-knit, maybe too close. We call it enabling a meshed family where everybody in the family is in everybody's business. Whereas the wife comes from a more emotionally a distant family where they did not have family dinners together, they did not express emotion, they did not talk about their problems. So the husband is saying that she's not verbally affectionate enough, and the wife is saying that her husband is too needy. They cannot seem to meet each other's needs. Therefore, it turns into resentment. Therefore, it turns into emotional and physical isolation. And pretty soon, 7 years down the road, they're in my office talking about, this is our last resort. We're going to get divorced because he just doesn't understand me and she just doesn't understand me. Well, when you look at both of the family dynamics, his family was incredibly close and involved with each other, and her family wasn't. The thing that attracted him to her is the fact that she is very independent, because he's never seen that in a woman before, because his family is so close. And the thing that attracted her to him is that he is emotionally in tune, because his family was over emotional. So it's the opposites that attract, but when you have those opposites attract, they have to learn how to get through that life transition and physically and emotionally communicate with each other so both of their needs are met. But if I couldn't draw from their family history, we would just be sitting here the whole time talking about surface level stuff. He said, she said, he didn't do this, she didn't do this, and really that's not the problem.
So there's just be a bunch of blaming going back and forth.
Yes. In the therapy world, we call it the process versus the content. The content is he refuses to take out the trash even though I ask him constantly, and gender role says that it's his fault. The process is what's underneath that. Why is he refusing to take out the trash, and why is she so invested in gender roles?
Beautiful, beautiful. So what about couples therapy?
Yes.
What's the dynamic in that?
Couples therapy is really interesting. Two things to denote about couples therapy. You have premarital couples therapy, or what we as therapists call skills therapy, where you're coming in to learn foundational skills for your marriage. And when we talk about the foundation, we talk about, let's say if you're building a house, you want to build your house on good soil. You're going to have specialized experts come out and make sure that soil's good, make sure your house doesn't sink. Premarital therapy is like making sure that your soil, the soil of your marriage, is healthy, right? And you can do premarital at any time. You don't have to just be engaged or just newly married to do that. We've had couples come in who've been married for 30 years and be like, oh, we never had these skills, we're having problems. Let's do more of a workshop, let's do more of a class. Whereas you have actual couples therapy, where once again, as a marriage and family therapist, we're gonna try to find the root of your issues. So it may be attachment issues, where once again, one person was, we'll say, in a healthy way attached to their primary caregiver, and the other person wasn't. So the other person who's not healthily attached to their person of origin caregiver that person may have more difficulty being in relationships because they've been isolated from understanding what it looks like to move in a group or move with people. Whereas this other person can move independently and they can also move in a group. So in order to do that, once again, we're going to look at the generational patterns of all the relationships in their family, what they can tell us about them, understand their views of relationship, look at how they communicate with each other. Are they constantly tearing each other down? What's the language that's used? And then we're going to go from there and teach them how to listen, because most people don't listen to understand. Most people listen to respond. So we'll go through things like that, active listening, give them some tools. But once again, we're always going to get to the root of the issue on both ends.
So they're just waiting for their turn to speak.
Yes. And that's most people, right? We don't communicate to make sure the other person understands. We usually communicate to them the way that we would understand. So that takes a lot of practice, especially for couples.
It absolutely does. I took a interpersonal communication class a few years back, and it all went away. So I was actively listening all the time, you know. So, over time, I lost the skill.
It's work. To be in relationship is work, and I think that's the thing that people don't necessarily like.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute, because why does it have to be so much work?
I mean, when we're talking about a relationship, you're putting two people together. Let's say even if they're 18 and 18, right? You're putting two people together that already have 18 years of life experience and having them meld that together without them even really talking about it and understand what that means, right? So we could go to my house for Christmas and it could be the exact opposite of what your house and your family does for Christmas, and your eyes are completely open to things that you probably like or don't like.
But I love you. None of that matters, right?
What is that movie where they say love isn't enough, or they talk about love don't cost a thing? Relationships cost things. They cost time, they cost money, they cost effort.
Okay.
But it's a continuous effort to, one, stop, pause, and think. Stop before you say stuff. Stop before you react. Pause, think, and then create a solution or react. Relationships are constantly that. You can't always do and say what you want, right? You're no longer just an independent. You have to check in with this person. You have to think about what you're going to say before you say it. You have to think about how your time is spent. You have to think about how you present yourself, or how you guys present yourself as a couple. It's not just this fluid thing that you move through, right? So it's work.
So how does the current, this couples therapy thing, that just have so many questions.
Go for it.
I know we have other stuff to cover.
That's okay. We can talk about it.
So how does that work we're talking about power dynamics? Should I say contemporary roles versus traditional roles? Big, heavy quotations, right?
Yeah.
I know younger people perhaps are probably grown up in a system where traditional roles are not something that was seen or practiced, right, for the most part. But for older people, couples, that can be quite a challenge, right? Talking about power dynamics.
Yeah.
The woman's working, girlfriend, wife, lover, what have you.
Yeah.
Perhaps makes more money than her partner does. A lot of those things really can damage a relationship, even though your mindset is that it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
What have you seen in your experience with that? Does the pendulum start going the other way when you start out saying it doesn't matter and then it becomes a problem?
My first question to the couple would be asking specifically what doesn't matter, right? because with that phrase, what doesn't matter, especially when it comes to finances, to me, I'm like, oh, there's always something under that. There is no such thing when you talk about finances and then coupling that with the word, it doesn't matter, right? But couples will say that because it's more of a avoidance tactic. We're not raised in a society where critically confronting people, but in like an integritous, respectful manner is praised, right? We're not taught conflict resolution in school. You would have to take a class or watch a YouTube video. So for most people, it's easier to kind of put that stuff on the back burner or kind of be like an ostrich and stick your head in the sand and just be like, we'll figure it out. Or, you know, we both make money and we've both been sustaining individually. So we'll just kind of meld and we'll go with that. Right. But that does not work.
Well, do you find the expectations for one person is more than what the expectation is for the other person? What I mean by that is, I make more money than you, but I, still expect you to do certain things. Or the other side, I make the money, so you should follow my lead.
Right. I mean, I feel like most couples don't have this conversation in the first place, and that's why they end up in therapy, because we need to lay these expectations out on the table. Most people expect that they're both going to operate together, but like we call it parallel play for kids, where kids at certain ages will play beside each other but not play together. So most people don't think about it, or they might think about it, but they might not have the conversation with their partner of like, these are the expectations that I have for you. So they're coming into therapy, and as the therapist, we're slowing down what communication they are doing and saying, did you realize that was an expectation, Paul? Did you realize that was an expectation, Sheila? What are your guys' roles? Who does pay the bills? Who does take out the trash? Are there male and female, the traditional male and female gender expectations? And then depending on what their answer is, then you can ask, well, where did you get that from? And did that work for your parents? And, what do you guys want it to look like in your household? Because once again, most people plan for the wedding and don't plan for the marriage. So a lot of the problems are the lack of communication, the things that they do not talk about. Most couples that I see, the gender roles are still traditional, interestingly enough. Even if the female, if we're talking about a heterosexual couple, even if the female does make more money, a lot of times she's still coming home, making dinner, doing laundry. However, that's not everybody. A lot more males are sitting, doing homework, doing bath time, da-da-da-da-da. It just depends. But once again, with couples, the number one thing is communication. People think they communicate well, and they don't. Mm-hmm. People think they express their needs, and they don't. People think they express their expectations clearly, and they don't. You ask their partner to repeat what they said, their partner has no idea what they said, or they say it how they think it was said. So
they're interpreting
incorrectly.
Mm-hmm. What are a few of the major conflicts you see between couples, be it couples or a marriage situation?
So this is actually what we specialize, helping people move through life transitions. And generally said, it's always a life transition. People get stuck. So how do we want to parent our kids, even though our kids are already here?
Yeah. Never talk about that one beforehand.
Right. So
what are your ideals about raising children? Oh, we never had that conversation.
Or if they did, it was just very surface.
Peripheral, yeah.
Right. It wasn't with our interracial couples. It wasn't, what's the difference between raising a person of color versus a person who's white? Right? So you may have a husband who's white and a mom who's black, and she understands some of the things that her child's going to face, whereas the dad who's black is kind of, I hate to say it, who's white is kind of off in la la land and living like in this utopia, and then doesn't understand the different cultural things that you need to prepare your child for. Or it could be as simple as do we breastfeed or do we not breastfeed? Are we going to do all organic food or non-organic food? When are we going to take our baby out? You know, you find that when men become dads, they become very protective, and they're just like, no, the baby is not leaving the house. So that becomes a fight, because the mom is like, I'm getting out of here. So if you're not staying here with the baby, it's coming with me. It becomes these little things that you never imagined would be issues, and they're issues. Finances, how many times they are intimate in a week.
Let's talk about that one for a minute.
Okay.
So in your experience, when you're sitting with couples and they're talking about their intimacy issues, is it always the man who is, you know,
Wanting more?
yeah.
No. To answer
I
your
was
question.
trying to find a more.
It's okay. We're here, so we might as well just, you know, in therapy, we just got to call it like it is, because I got to make sure I understand what you're saying. So
Absolutely.
I'll just say it.
Okay.
You know, it's not always the male who would like to be intimate more frequently. There you go. That's a more eloquent way to say it. It's not always the male. Sometimes it is the female. Usually it appears to be the older male, you know, who's working more tired, things like that. But no, it's not always the male. Sometimes it's the female, because for some females, their love language is touch, and so being intimate is definitely one of their needs as a couple. So yeah.
So love language in a situation where you have a couple who's obviously been together for a little while, be it 30 days or 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't the other partner be educated on that at some point?
So, yeah, that's a really good question, actually.
I ask good questions.
So what we've seen is, you would think, yeah, that the partner would be educated on their partner's love languages, which there's a great book, The 5 Love Languages. There's a whole website and a quiz that you guys can take. But basically, you know, quality time, physical touch, acts of kindness, gifts, and did I say words of affirmation? I might be missing the 5th one, but y'all can look it up. But anyways, what we see often is that when life transitions happen, so you get married, you become more of a couple, and you know, you kind of cleave to each other and not your families. You have a baby, your baby goes to preschool, kindergarten, high school, college, your parents get older, you have to take care of them, they move in. Any of these life transitions, you get fired, you get hired, people change, and their needs may become different. It doesn't necessarily mean that their love language has changed, but a lot of times I've seen it where, you know, for example, maybe the wife will change to a job where she has more work responsibilities, and it takes a lot out of her, whereas before, the job she had before wasn't as demanding. So her need of quality time was already being met because she was home more. And this is just an example. But now that she's at work and she's constantly taking care of other people, now the type of quality time she wants is, she doesn't want to have to plan the date. She doesn't want to have to think about anything. You know what I mean? She just wants him to tell her, be ready by 6 on Saturday, and he's going to take care of everything. Whereas before, when she didn't have such a demanding job where she was in charge of everything, she didn't mind planning the date nights, she didn't mind driving to the date nights, she didn't mind doing any of that. But this explanation that I'm explaining to you is what's missing, right? Because then all of a sudden she comes home and her expectation is that he plans the date night, and he's like, why are you mad at me for not planning the date night when you've planned the date night for the last 20 years?